It's a beautiful day for the South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route. We are going to be riding 90 kilometers to 6 cideries in 3 days, catching 4 ferries with 5 ladies? Just 3 today. I don't know. If we miss any ferry, the whole thing comes a crumbling down. So, yay! First stop, Valley Cider. Rolling up. Or something, I don't know, fuck it.
On the first day, we have Miranda and Vanessa on the bikes and Daniel in the car filming, and we have an easy 11-kilometer ride from my house to Valley Cider. The country roads of Cowichan are just freaking spectacular to ride on. The shoulders are wide, the roads are generally pretty clean, and the countryside is a lovely rolling farmland. Yeah, I'm a bit biased because this section of our trip is near my house and I ride it all the time, but whatever. Cowichan is the best. Our first stop was at Valley Cider. It's the newest craft cidery on our route, and it had only been open a few months by the time we rolled up.
Cider apples are these small, gnarled, scabby, horrible tasting things.
This is Bruce, owner and cider maker at Valley Cider. Bruce has a huge wealth of knowledge when it comes to the history of cider production.
That dark stuff is pure cider juice.
With all this knowledge, Bruce has been able to combine traditional cider practices with a modern twist.
The cider that I make is what's being called now modern cider. It's largely from a culinary perspective. It's using culinary apples for now. Cider apples will be coming later once the orchard starts to mature. And what makes a cider different is that gives me a lot of creative license to produce ciders that have greatly different flavor profiles, using all natural ingredients, many of which are foraged from the property here. We have 27 acres that all the blackberries, all of the salal berries, the Oregon grape, the fir tips all come from here.
And with this modern twist, Bruce has been able to come up with some flavorful options like Cideries, Love Potion, or my favorite, the Humulus lupulus. Humulus lupulus. Humulus lupulus.
Humulus lupulus.
Why are you making cider here on Vancouver Island?
I wanted to make it here because I found that this area is a beautiful heritage zone for apple growing. My idea was to come here and start planting trees much in the tradition that you have here naturally, which are larger trees, bigger rootstock, and it's going to be wonderful. I think that you can produce really big trees with great flavored apples, really rich flavors that'll only get better year after year.
Yeah. So if you weren't making cider, what would you be doing with your time?
Netflix. If
If
I wasn't making cider, no. Well, that's a really good question because I know it sounds maybe a bit cloying, but yeah, there is no plan B. This is what I knew I wanted to do. And when you get to a certain age, not saying how old I am, you start making demands. You start putting your foot down more with your life, and the choices that you make and the decisions that you make are largely value-based. No, this is what I'm going to do. I was sure of it. I'm prepared for it, and I know it's going to work. It's the life I want.
And with our first cider stop complete, we were off to Crofton to get the first of 4 ferries. The ferry from Crofton to Salt Spring is a quick one, just 30 minutes. But even with only half an hour, we still made friends because cyclists cannot help but talk to each other. These dudes were biking from Edmonton to South America. We were like, woot woot, we're just cycling for cider. Okay, bye. Salt Spring is notorious for being a hilly beast of an island. The good news is that on the Cider Cycle Circle Route, we actually don't go into Ganges. And taking the Vesuvius and Long Harbor ferries means that we don't have to bike up that hill outside of Ganges to get to Fulford. Which means that our time on Salt Spring was actually pretty smooth sailing, only made sweeter because we got to stop at Wild Cider.
So we've made it all the way to Salt Spring Wild Cider. Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Can you tell me a little bit about the type of cider you produce here?
The type of cider. Well, we make a number of different ciders. We make, right now we've got 10, but we're always coming up with something new. But I think the heart of what we're doing here is using the wild apple trees that grow on Salt Spring Island. Salt Spring, it's kind of well known now. It used to be the biggest producer of apples in all of BC. Back in the early 1900s, and the legend has it that there were more apple trees than people at one point. And so now it's just a wonderful place to be making cider because we've got all these old apple trees that have been underutilized for 50, 60 years.
There are about 450 different varieties of apples on Salt Spring, which gives wild cider a huge selection to choose from when it comes to blending.
I feel like cider makers are all also historians. They have so much knowledge within the craft.
Well, I don't know about so much knowledge, but it's really nice to be able to connect with the history of Salt Spring and to sort of represent Salt Spring apples to the world by way of our cider. So I think that makes the ciders unique. It's, we get some varieties, Belle de Bois Scoops, Baldwins, varieties that you probably haven't heard of, Canada Renyettes, Ashmead's Kernel.
Wait, Ashmead's Kernel? Belle de Bois Scoops? Canada Renyettes? Apples sound like they have celebrity baby names.
So yeah, apples that you don't find in the Okanagan. And we're lucky to get here.
We're on this adventure. We've done. You're our second stop. Do you have any advice for us?
Go to the mall. I think, yeah. No, I think advice for you on your trip. Yeah. Well, don't drink and ride. How about that? But sipping is essential, I would say, and. Other tokens of advice, I just think you're going to have a great time, and I'm jealous. Take me with you. That's a bit of advice.
After filling ourselves on Wild Cider's menu, we jumped back on the bikes with full bellies, the best condition for riding. I was paranoid that we were going to miss all of our ferries, so I insisted that we got to the terminals super early, which meant a lot of waiting around, but luckily it was a beautiful day. And then we just got on the boat, cruised over to Pender, and it was no big deal. From the ferry to the campsite, we cruised down some very steep hills that would have to be dealt with tomorrow. We biked over to the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve, where we would be staying for our first night. So you're like, where did all the camp stuff come from? How were you carrying the tents this whole time? Oh yeah, Daniel is driving the car and doing all the filming, and we put everything in the Corolla. This is my actual definition of luxury travel.
Yeah, I think
that's not food safe. But anyway, we went to 2 cideries today. And it was super fun. And now we're on Pender. And tomorrow we're gonna have to go up some really big hills that we came down today. And we're going to 3 cideries tomorrow.
Day 2 on the South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route. Yesterday we booted it over to Pender Island and camped at the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve, which is a Parks Canada park. It's very lovely. And today we are going to 3 cideries. 1, Twin Island Cider, just 3 kilometers from here, very convenient. 2, Sea Cider, which is a ferry away from here and just like 10 more kilometers after that, not too bad. And 3, where we are camping for the night, is Tod Creek Cider, and it's gonna be great. But first, hills.
They say friendship is the only cure for climbing hills. Or maybe that's just something I say when we're grinding up the winding curves of Pender Island. Either way, it was all totally worth it to get to Twin Island Cider. This is Matthew, one of the owners and cider makers here at Twin Island Cider. It turns out Pender Island, like Salt Spring, is a bit of an apple haven.
Our first pour is a blend of over 30 varieties at least, every year we can recount and we find it's actually more than 30. We just, as a safeguard, write over a dozen, and then we realize we're quickly wrong. And depending on how much time we have in the tasting room, we talk about those varieties with people. We explain the history. For the most part, they came from 100-year-old homesteads up to 120-year-old orchards that were planted here on the island.
Twin Islands is a small operation with a limited run, but that's just how they like it.
For Katie and myself, it's been about the relationship with the trees and then the community itself. So as we were picking 30 varieties, they're not all from one orchard. They're from over 20 different backyards and homesteads and farms. And to maintain that relation year after year has embedded us in this community and brought me back to my home.
So what's your favorite cider to drink then?
Well, that changes through the season. It definitely varies, but I have loved our funkier ciders. Our Pender this year was a really fun, funky, bready pear apple blend. I just love saying barnyard.
Nice. Do you want to say it again?
Barnyard.
Nice.
You try it.
Barnyard.
Daniel, the camera operator and driver of gear on this trip, is a Pender. Some say he's a direct descendant of the Pender that this island is named after. He wanted me to ask this question.
When Penders come here, do you have to treat them differently?
They already expect extra treatment. Just talk to your aunt.
The third ferry of the trip takes us back to mainland Vancouver Island. We land in Swartz Bay, which is just a 10-kilometer ride to our next stop. For the first time on the trip, we get to utilize a bike path. The Lochside Trail runs beside the Pat Bay Highway and is some excellent riding. After biking on the Gulf Islands, this smooth, flat path gave us our fastest pace of the whole trip. We friggin' ripped to Sea Cider. And the best part of making it to Sea Cider, now with Hannah and Tira on our side, the Cider Cycle Circle gang is complete.
So we've made it to one of these 6 stops on the South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route here in Saanich. We are at Sea Cider with Kristen. Kristen, can you tell me about what makes Sea Cider stand out in the craft cider community?
Sure. I guess first of all, we are a orchard-based cidery. We're a certified organic orchard. We make certified organic cider. And one of the really unique things about our orchard is that we grow almost exclusively cider varieties. So these are varieties that are grown only for making cider. You wouldn't find them in the grocery stores, you wouldn't find them in the farmers markets, and so that's what's pretty special around Sea Cider, I would say.
Did you plant all of the trees here yourself then?
I did. Whoa. Yeah, so that was a big year. So back in 2004, we dug 1,000 holes and then we planted 1,000 trees, and ever since then, everything else feels a lot easier. I keep thinking about that whenever I'm griping about work and think, you could be planting more trees, Kristen. So it was a lot of hard work at the beginning.
You're gonna dig 1,000 holes in 1 year. Everything else is fine.
Yeah, I don't even get me started about the composted chicken manure, because I smelt like that for I think nearly a year.
My favorite of your ciders is Rum Runner, but it's very dangerous, I have learned.
Yeah, so Rum Runner would be one of those ciders I'd say is more of a sipping cider. You don't want to pound back a pint of it. If you're on your bike and you're thirsty, I might steer you to something a little bit lighter. Rum Runner is one of the ciders in our barrel series, so it's got a little more potent than some of the other ones, and it's an interesting one. They all have a story to them, but Rum Runner itself, as you probably know, is a cider we've made by aging the cider in rum-soaked bourbon barrels. So it's pretty tasty.
It is delicious. So there are not just us, it feels like hundreds of cyclists out here. What do you offer
cyclists? Like, are they coming all the time? We are here, but are you getting lots of cycling traffic?
We certainly see lots of cyclists, partly because we're right off the Lochside Trail, so it's easy to get to us if you're a cyclist, and it's a sort of friendly region for biking around. And for cyclists, we do offer special incentives. We realize this is hard to get here, and hats off to those that have made the effort. We appreciate the fact that people are getting out of their cars and into their bikes to come here. So, yeah, depending on the time of year and the month, we usually have some kind of special offer for the cyclists.
Nice.
Cider is incentive enough for us. With helmets and gloves on, we were back on the bike for the final ride of the day. We were cruising south to Tod Creek Cider.
So we cycled down from Sea Cider down to Tod Creek, where we are staying in the orchard for the night and attending a pig roast. What? Amazing.
This is Chris. He has a passion for craft cider, and he's on a mission to take craft practices and make them more accessible to the everyday cider drinker.
So what makes us different is we're a craft cider, we're a farm crafted cidery, and we age our cider for a long time. We make it in traditional methods. We use small batches, but we also make it a little more accessible. So we can a lot of our cider. As far as I know, we're one of Canada's first cideries to put craft cider into a can.
Yeah, you don't see that very often.
No, you don't, because it's expensive. So our Tod cider, 5 years ago, we put into cans, and it was the first 100% apple juice, to the best of my knowledge, probably in all of North America, but for sure Canada. So that makes us a little different. Okay.
So what do you love about making cider, like personally for you, in your apple heart passion?
What I love about cider is just the fact that it's a good quality fruit that we're making a really nice beverage from, or drink. When I started the cider business, I didn't really know as much about cider as I do now, of course. And I was a big Strongbow drinker. I was like, I love Strongbow, I can make it. And then I should learn how to make cider. And then I realized, through the training, is that Strongbow is like 40% apple juice and the rest is water and sugar. I'm like, okay, that's not the style I want to do. So it's nice because I can take my apples, and these are all bittersweet fruit that we're sitting amongst. I can take them, I can blend them make different concoctions. I can add different fruit flavorings like blueberry juice or blackberry juice and things like that. It makes some really nice beverages that are 100% juiced and follow that whole craft farm methodology.
Yeah, and that's delicious.
Thank you. Yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
So,
and tonight's the pig roast. Can you tell me a little bit about what we can expect from the evening ahead?
Eat, drink, and be merry, I guess. So this is kind of like celebrating the harvest, and it's nice because my apple trees are looking good. They're bigger, it's a ton of work planting these damn things and looking after them. Yeah. So, yeah, it's just a big,
harvest for cideries. It's like, it's the time.
It's time. It's good cider. It's reasonably priced. You can come visit us. No, what else can I say? It's good product. Yeah.
Nice.
We set up our tents in the orchard and headed to the pig roast. We learned later that other guests were calling us orchard hipsters, but I feel like that's both accurate and appropriate. The pig roast was incredible, and it more than hit the spot after 2 days of riding. So after an evening of good eats, we bundled up into our tents, prepping for our final day. And that night, the skies opened up and it poured rain. Our sweet spot under the willow next to Tod Creek turned out to be a bit of a flood spot, and Vanessa ended up swimming for most of the night. Tod Creek, more like Tod Inlet. Am I right? From here, we were off to catch the last ferry of the trip. Just a wee boat ride from Brentwood to Mill Bay. Then a quickie cruise to Marydale for their Cider Harvest Festival.
it all the way to Marydale for the Cider Cycle Circle Route. Woo! I mean the Cider Harvest Festival. Too many things. But we're here with Janet. Janet, can you tell us about the Cider Harvest Festival?
The Cider Harvest Festival is like a really cool thing for us because we've invited all of the cideries, all the craft cideries, right? So it's all those people really dedicated to craft and making it a certain way and smaller batches, focusing in on the apples, focusing in on just those flavor profiles. So super cool because we've gathered everybody here today, and with being the first cidery, it's just kind of amazing for us to see just how many people are now like, oh my gosh, look at all this cider to drink. So craft is definitely a really big thing for people now, and that's pretty cool to see.
What kind of changes have you seen over the years of craft cider, from like having all of these heritage apples to where we are now?
Right. Well, when we first started, people didn't know what craft cider tasted like. They thought a cider was something that was really sweet, which is basically what it was before when it was a commercial cider. So now craft cider has evolved into all these different, as I was saying before, different flavor profiles. People are actually growing cider apples where they weren't doing it before. People are discovering like these old heritage cider apples, and people are just becoming that much more aware of it.
Can you tell me just a little bit about your cider? What is your methodology behind the madness?
The methodology. Well, so our philosophy has always been work with the community that we're with. So for us, it's always about playing with the other cideries. We focus on being organic. We're not certified, but we focus on organics in our farming practices, organics in our cider making practices, and then it's about the community itself, like who we are. We try to be fun, Meg. We try to have a good time and
I'm having fun.
Excellent. So we like to put that into our brand too. So we look for things to do now, like the seasonal ciders that are fun.
Well, I'm having tons of fun. This is an amazing way for us to end the whole route. I mean, most of the cideries that we saw are here, so really we didn't even need to do the whole thing. We could have just come here and done it here, but
you did need to do it because you got that sense of like the craft and the farm, right? That's what makes it cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of hills on Pender too.
Yeah, islands are like that, Meg. Yeah.
With that, the route is complete.
And that's it. Made it to Marydale, made it to the Cider Harvest Festival, went to 6 cideries in 3 days, cycling 90 kilometers. I want to thank all of our rad ladies who cycled so far with us, and all of the cideries who were so kind and let us come in and taste their cider, and especially Tod Creek that let us stay in the orchard and invited us to a pig roast, and Marydale who had us at this festival, and Salt Spring Cider who had the amazing huge flights, and Valley Cider with their brand new tasting room, and Twin Island Ciders who opened early for us, and Sea Cider who were so busy when we were there but still let us come in. It was just so incredible, and how welcoming everyone was. These are our cideries. South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
Yeah! South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route. It's the South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
It's the South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
What's your signature move?
South Island. Say it again.
South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
South Island Cider Cycle Circle Route.
South Island Cycle Circle Route.
Cider Cycle Route.
Cider Cycle Circle Route.
South Island Cider Circle Cider Route.
South Island Cider Cycle Route. Cider. What?